Hello, my spooky friends. This is John, your host of Dairyland Frights in the spookier podcast, Nightland Frights. And I wanted to thank all my spooky friends out there for listening. I truly appreciate it. Please like and subscribe and rate us 5 stars. It helps me make this a better podcast. And make sure you comment what guests you would like me to have on, what topics you would like me to talk about. It's only going to make this podcast better. So again, thank you so much for listening. And please go to my Patreon. Check that out. Become a Periscani for only $3, a spooky friend for $1. And remember, stay spooky. Hello, my spooky friends. This is John, your host of Dairyland Frights, and welcome to another episode of Dairyland Frights, the paranormal podcast that covers everything spooky, creepy, and mysterious in the Midwest. But tonight, we're going to go a little bit away from the Midwest. We'll stay with the topic, but I have some great spooky guests on the show. It continues. I'm so blessed to have these guys on from the podcast Beyond the Shadows. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Really, we're excited to be here.
It is Ryan and Left Shoe Bandit.
I forgot that was up there. The last bunch we did that with. It's Scott.
Yes.
It's the Left Shoe Bandit.
It's a long story.
Awesome. So before I get into questions with Ryan and Scott here, again, please check these Ryan and Scott's podcast out. It's really wonderful. They do some really cool stuff. They have some mini clips and stuff, some paranormal things, some mysteries, a little bit, of things that you go, well, that's strange. Like, wait a minute. And you'll watch their clips and you'll try to figure it out. And that's where I saw these guys. And I'm like, I got to get them on the podcast. And they were very gracious enough to come on. So thank you again. So let's talk about your podcast. But first, I want you guys to tell me about yourself. Ryan, let's start with you. Why did you decide to do a podcast and kind of focus on the paranormal and some other things?
So during my life, I've always been in all things mysterious, paranormal, true crime. It's been an interest of mine since going back as long as I can remember. Unsolved mysteries, whatever show was on, I was watching it, digesting it. And then if I was really into it, like Nessie or Bigfoot or something, I'd dig further, have my mother take me down to the library. So it's kind of like a lifelong passion. So maybe about a year and a half ago, Scott reached out to me and he was in the mood to do a podcast, which I wasn't overly familiar with. I didn't really listen. I knew what they were, but I didn't really listen to them. So I was like, yeah, I don't know. But then when we started talking about possible ideas and it meshed exactly with the things I enjoyed, I was like, why not be able to look into the things you love and talk about them? It doesn't get much better than that. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where we met in terms of the true crime and the paranormal and whatever. And that's what we're doing now.
So before I get to Scott, Ryan, I have to ask you a question. Did you watch Leonard Nimoy's In Search of? Do you remember that show at all?
I have seen some of it, yeah. Not all of them, but I've seen some of them.
Do yourself a favor. It is the greatest thing ever. Leonard Nimoy's voice from Star Trek.
I love him.
People don't know that.
Yeah.
Some people don't always know who he was. The great thing is most of them are on YouTube now. You can get them, or you can find them somewhere, What I love to do is to turn off the lights, put it on, and they used to do these like half an hour thing, and they would have this weird music like Bigfoot, and then I can't do Leonard Nimoy's voice. Sorry, guys.
No, nobody can.
I thought you nailed it. That was it.
And then. Yeah. Thank you, Scott. And then I really loved Unsolved Mysteries because Robert Stack would come in and there'd be fog. There's always fog around him. It wouldn't matter.
He has such a dramatic voice. Dun, 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 dun. It just builds attention. But now,
I know.
Now Shatner's got his own shows, like the whole Star Trek. They've all branched off in their own, but it's a fascinating genre, and there's enough room for so many shows. There's so many mysteries, and I'll watch the same mystery covered on 3 or 4 different shows because everybody else got a like slightly different take or a slightly different angle, and sometimes they have a little bit more information, or and it's.
Yeah, there's always a little something you didn't know. You hear a little tidbit.
Yeah, and that's what I love too about your podcast and my podcast. we talk about maybe similar subjects, but we do it in a different way. So if someone's looking for a little variety or whatever, they can be like, hey, I can listen to Scott and Ryan, Beyond the Shadows, or I can listen to John Dairyland Fright. So, Scott, tell me about yourself and how you got into the paranormal.
Well, I get into it just, I think I said this on someone else's podcast, mental illness. I don't do well with winters. I can't stand to be cooped up. I get cabin fever really bad.
I hear you.
So I bet I was into podcasts. I've been listening to them for quite a while. And when I was listening, I'm always like, man, I think I could do that. Maybe. Right. I knew I couldn't do it by myself. And then I hit up Ryan. Ryan's my cousin. So I hit up Ryan and I'm like, hey, man, I got an idea. Let's try this. And so it grew. It went from there. We didn't really know how many episodes we would go. We didn't know how long it would go for, but we didn't really think anybody was going to listen. But it's we're 84 episodes in. It's been well over a year now, and it's going really good. So
and I love you guys. You guys have fun, and you sound really interested in the subject, which I love. Like, I listen to a lot of podcasts, especially during the work day. Just because I'm like, it makes my day go faster. But the ones I typically stick to are the ones that I like the people who are talking about things like you guys. Maybe you guys, I don't like the big studio and then, you know what I mean? They have the $1 million budget and the intern getting them coffee and you know what I'm saying? It's like,
you don't have an intern, John.
Hey, I hear you. I hear you.
One for each one of us.
Yes, we'll all have interns. Just up. Where's
take
my
application
salad?
Start next week.
Yeah, come on. Pay is optional. Anyway, so
it's
tell
an
me about
internship.
You're getting experience, so take it or leave
what
it.
Not to do.
So tell me about your podcast. Like, if I was like, I know nothing. Let's say I know nothing about it, and I'm like, hey, what's this about? What would you tell someone that kind of like?
So I would describe us as a dark-based podcast. We cover a lot of dark subjects, but we approach it with like a bit of ADHD. Scott and I, we take turns. So if nobody's ever listened to it, we take turns each week. So Scott will tell a story one week. He'll do all the researching and he'll tell the story. The next week, I will do the same. And so we'll cover everything from mysteries, disappearances, paranormal, true crime, reincarnation, possessions, all those things dark. I think what keeps us interesting, though, is so if it's Scott's week, I don't have a script. Nor does he on mine. A lot of times, right until prior to recording, I don't even know what he's covering, nor does he I. So I think that keeps the conversation and all the perspectives fresh. And I think both of us, when we're the listener, try to approach it from the standpoint of the listener and maybe ask those questions that they would ask, So we want it to come off as more like an experience in a community rather than just a podcast. So we encourage listeners to write in with any questions, hit us up on any of the social media. Just say hi. So I think that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, the thing is me and Ryan our taste in what we do is completely different. He's the true crime guy. Well, different kind of true crime. He'll do the serial killers and stuff like that. I let him do that. That's his specialty. But we cover we let him be a serial killer. He's pretty good at it, really. Our pit is full.
You're pretty good at it for you.
Our pit is overflowing. He's doing a really good job. But no, he does a lot of that stuff. We do the ghosts, the alien. I do a lot of alien, UFO, and different types of true crime. But it's always something different. We mix it up that way. And we have a segment of the show that our show is broken up into 3 segments. When we first start and we come on, we do usually it's some kind of funny or pertinent news to what we talk about. And so we do a news segment. Normally it's some kind of crazy stories. And then after the news, we go into the actual story that we're doing that week. And then after that, we have a segment of the show, like Ryan said, it's called the Fire Pit, where we encourage listeners or other podcasts or anybody who has their own story to send it in. They can record it or they can write it down or whatever, but send it to us and we will play it in the Fire Pit so for everybody to hear. So that's how our show is just broken up into those 3 segments. So
that I love that. And we talked off air. I already got a Fire Pit story that we'll have to work out here about.
Yeah, we look forward to it. Sounds like an interesting one for sure.
It's crazy. So one of the things I want to ask you guys, how do you guys now, Ryan, when you pick a topic, what interests you in the topic? Because we're kind of doing a kind of true crime tonight one. I won't give something away, just a little tease, but what interests you now?
I'll actually think about it maybe like a month ahead of time. So what I'm doing next week, I'm already thinking about, and then I'm generally thinking 2 or 3 topics ahead of time. But I can't tell you what lands me on a particular subject. I will do, say, a serial killer 1 week, and then it'll be Scott's week the next week, and then the week after that, I'm thinking, you know what? There's a fascinating haunting I've been thinking about. I'm going to dive into that. And as much for the listeners as it is for myself, I jump around to keep it fresh. So I don't want to do 3 true crimes in a row. I don't really have a strategy. I just try to keep it fresh and land on a subject that interests me, because it's going to show through in your work. If I did something I wasn't interested in or passionate about, it's going to show through in the performance, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's basically how I land on that.
So have you ever done a story, Ryan? Let's say I'm just going to pick with serial killers. Have you? Because I always laugh. I always tell people, and it drives my wife crazy, when I'm at a party, when I'm getting bored, I talk serial killers, and you just see people just slowly move away from it. And my wife goes, "Will you stop that?" And I'll be like, "Hey, do you know Jeffrey Dahmer used to have a brilliant Christmas party?
Having a bag of dicks in your closet, is that abnormal?"
We have bag of dick parties all the time.
Nobody told us.
No one said shit. No.
Is that bad etiquette?
I'm going to party with you guys.
Toss out the bag of dicks, I guess.
But, it's her fault for bringing me to the Christmas party. That's what I was telling her.
Exactly.
I said I didn't want to go. And now she's smartened up. She's like, "You are not going because you're going to do one of your serial killer stories." And I'm like, "Damn it." Like, come on.
What makes you tick? It's up to her. If she brings you there and you go off, it's her fault, not yours.
It's totally her fault.
That's not on
you.
You.
Get all the information beforehand. She made the choice.
So I got a recommendation for you guys. I just did the story on a serial killer called Herb Baumeister. You guys heard of him?
I'm only familiar with that because that's the one you just did with Kevin from Where the Weird Ones Are, right?
Yeah.
So I've only heard that name from that episode. We listened to that. I thought it was great. Great episode.
Yeah, love Kevin.
Otherwise, no, I'm not familiar with that one.
I highly recommend to do this one because when you look at this guy, he's only thing I could say, he looks like a guy who does your taxes. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. He's not a guy that they think killed over 50 people. 50. And
they never are they?
Yeah, right? And at Fox Hollow Farm, what he did was, and I just, okay, this doesn't make any sense. And people listen to the episode here. I got to plug myself too, guys.
Sure.
Listen to the episode where he used to like grind up the skeletons and then scatter the bone like you would fertilize your lawn. So there are bones everywhere on this farm, everywhere. They're just, they've been finding this for the guy who lives there now. Well, his family that lives there now. Yeah, it's not, they'll be like out in the woods walking. There's a femur bone. It's crazy what he did. The guy was unbelievable, and that he was married for 15 years when he was doing this is.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. How's that even pop? My wife knows when I like take extra like cookie out of the whatever,
You come home covered in blood. Oh no, nothing, honey. Just
Are you taking the trash down, or were you killing somebody?
That shit again.
I'm killing somebody. Here's my bag of dicks.
One more for the bag.
Yeah, ladies, check your man's closet. If there's a bag of dicks up there, it's a bit of a red flag.
Yeah, please, ladies. If he tells you not to go in the closet, go in that closet.
Not my bag of dicks. I found it on the road. I put it up there. I was going to bring it to the cops tomorrow.
Why'd you put it in the dick closet? Huh?
Awesome. So anyway, that's just something if you guys want to look into, please look into. I think you guys would be surprised at this guy, that it's unbelievable. And that, he has a farm that people, well, not really a farm, but as you guys listen to, a house, really nice house that people live in, are like, yeah, okay. Yeah, all right. I'm cool with it. I'm like, okay. So, Scott, tell me about one of the things you said do like UFOs. And one thing is always fascinated me because I'm really into it too. is we've basically told the American public, right? There's UFOs, and people have treated it like, okay, like, yeah.
I don't think people are paying attention. They're not paying attention. Because there is so much stuff out right now about UFO. If you're a person that's even a little bit interested, you could go on YouTube and pull up the news. And on the legitimate news, there's hundreds of stories. There's one today. You know, and I'm not talking about stories of, look, here there's a UFO. I share that stuff on Instagram all the time. I'm talking about, there's another congressional meeting to talk about our government hiding UFOs from us. So I mean, yeah, it's such a hot topic right now. So many people just aren't paying attention.
Yeah. So same with you, Scott. Do you choose your stories kind of like Ryan does? Like, I'm kind of in the mood to talk about this.
Yeah, well, I got the ones that I like, and then like him, I'm like, I don't want to do the same exact thing over and over. For a little stretch there, I was doing a lot of alien abductions, and I'm like, I need to spread this out and kind of move it around a little bit. So I like I do like true crime, but I like the different kind of stuff. Like this next episode I'm doing is about the Silk Road. It's a internet about he ran a drug prize on the internet. On the dark web. So, I mean, I like to do some of the stuff like that mixed in with hauntings. And, you know, I like to do, if I've done a haunting, I'll move on to UFO, onto some other type of true crime or reincarnation or something like that. Some survival stories. I love stuff like that.
Yeah. So does either of you have a favorite episode so far? I mean, you're only about 83 or whatever episodes. And do you have a favorite so far that you're like, man, maybe we'll revisit this one?
We've got my favorite one that I've done, that I've looked into, is it was called The Devil in Carolina. Pazuzu Algarad. I think it was North Carolina. He's I can't even describe him. You'd have to listen to it. Scott, you wouldn't believe it happened if you didn't. I saw a special about it on TV. That's why I was like, I've never heard of this guy, and I dug into that, and I was like, wow, it's crazy. So it's not one of those ones that happened 100 years ago. It was like 9-10 years ago. And it's crazy that shit can actually happen. But that's my favorite one that I've dug into. Unfortunately, there's no follow-up episodes. It's tied up. But
and Scott,
Scott's done a bunch that I have favorites of, but I'll let him tell you which his favorite.
My favorite would be, I like the story, but it's probably because we had the most fun on it, would be the Divot Box. We did a story about the Divot Box.
Right,
It's a crazy story, and there's a lot of humor for us in it, because the guy was just, I don't know, some of the stuff he did, but that's my favorite. It was probably the most fun episode that I did. Ryan's got a few that the last one Ryan did was fantastic.
Which was
now I just forgot, the Yuba County 5.
Yeah, the Yuba County 5. Yeah.
And what's that one? That rings a bell. What's that again?
So it was five good friends drove off to see a basketball game in California in 1978, and they never came home. They found 4 of them in the woods. They never found the 5th. So there's a ton of mystery and intrigue surrounding that one, as far as why they were where they were, what happened to them. I mean, nobody knows. I mean, all these years later, they still have absolutely no idea what happened to these guys.
Yeah, I like that. That was a good episode.
Weird. Yeah, that is so weird, and it's fairly recent, right?
It's not like 100 years ago.
Because a lot of stuff I do, like in the 1800s, by the way, was just this terrible place. It's just when I do a lot of ghost stories, or do a lot of history of haunted places, it's like, and the father killed his daughter and his his wife because he went insane, and blah, blah. I'm like, oh my God, didn't anybody have a good time in the 1800s? Anybody?
Those stories are easier to tell, though, because you don't have to worry about family and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Sometimes you can have a laugh or two, and you don't have to worry about offending anybody.
It's too recent. You don't want to offend anybody.
Yeah.
And then there's no forensics or any research whatsoever to speak about, because they didn't exist. No. If the guy didn't have a face, they weren't going to find him.
Right, exactly. It's not like they had cell phones where you go, I got him, he's right there. Dang.
I just pinged it off his horse. His horse is
just pinged it off his horse. Bing, there he is. Damn it.
Positive he had 2 legs and an arm. Find
him. Okay, so let me ask you this, though, before we get to the topic. Have either of you had a paranormal experience you would like to share?
I think we've actually both had.
We've had lots.
We've covered a lot of them on the show, but
Okay, but a personal one. Tell me one that's that maybe you guys had.
I'll go first, Scott, if you don't mind.
No, go for
so
it.
when I was in college, this is one of mine. So when I was in college, I'm dating myself a bit, so it goes back a ways. But I had a group of friends I hung out with, and it was around the same time that MTV's Fear was on, if you remember that.
Love it.
So they were always egging me on, or vice versa, to do something stupid. So one of the guys grew up in a small town about an hour or so from me. So it's not an area I was familiar with then, or even am now. So he had a long backstory that went with this house, and he told me it had been featured on a few shows due to the paranormal activity inside. I never verified any of that, but the bet he made me was basically that I wouldn't spend the night in the attic of that house by myself. So I decided to take them up on it, and so we drove out in the middle of nowhere, and I mean middle of nowhere. So no one entered the house but me. So they all set up big tents in the field next to the house and by the attic window. So I can say that if he had cooked up the whole story, they picked the perfect house because it was creepy as shit. So I want to say, I don't remember now. It's been so long. I had to go in at about 10 or 11, like that night, and I wasn't allowed out till like 5:30 the next morning. So basically, I was supposed to. They weren't going in with me, so the only way they were going to know that I was in the house is that I had to shine a flashlight out of the attic window. There was a single window every hour on the hour. That way, they didn't have to go in with me, and they knew I wasn't like hiding out in a field somewhere else. And the next morning, I'd go, okay, here I am. I get my $50.
Yay!
So other than that, I was on my own. They just went. We parked. They went out into the field next to the house. I went into the house. So once I made my way inside, it was really creepy. But it basically looked like nobody had been there for 50 years. Like the stuff was still there. Cobwebs, spiders, all that stuff. But otherwise, it looked like the people had just been there recently. I don't know how to describe it other than that. So when I get to the bottom of the stairs, it was like a huge pit. Like there was a hole in the floor, like I'd say 10 by 10. So it was a grand staircase, but I couldn't get to the grand staircase without creeping along the wall behind it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I had to do. So I make my way up the stairs. And no, I should mention they sent me in with a really shitty flashlight. That was delivery. I had no gear.
Really,
I had a flashlight that basically barely worked, and like 4 of those like Navy. One of my buddies was Navy. I don't know where it came from, but like glow sticks, the kind you'd shake up and break, and they give you like no light for 30 minutes. That was my supplies. So I made my way up the stairs. So I know the attic is on the 3rd floor. So I make my way up to the 2nd floor, but the stairs don't go to the 3rd floor. So it's a big grand staircase. And now I've got to check out the entire 2nd floor with my little shitty flashlight. I find the stairs at the end of a long hallway. There's a door, steep set of stairs, another door. So I go up the stairs, close the door behind me. Now I'm in the big attic. It's, huge attic, but it's got like all kinds of old shit in the middle. So I wasn't dealing with that shit, so I moved everything way off to one side because I want a clear view of this attic. You want to know what's coming up behind you, beside you. So I clear everything off to one side, and I sit against the wall on the far side of the room. So I've got a clear view of the whole attic, and I'm staring back at the door behind me. Now I'm not worried about the paranormal. My friend who told me about the house is just so full of shit that I know the whole story's made up. And they're just going to screw with me. So I was like, I'm going to have my eyes on the stairs. I know what's coming. So that's what I do. I plop down in the corner facing the door, and the sole window is to my left, maybe 6 feet up. There is a decent moonlight that night, so I wasn't completely in the dark, even without the flashlight. So I do have some light. So I plop down against the wall maybe about 11 o'clock, and nothing happens for hours, which I didn't expect. Maybe about 3:30, I finally hear that downstairs door open. Which like I said, I expected. They were going to fuck with me. I would have.
Yeah, right.
And then I hear the clomp on the stairs, but it was so slow and methodical. I'm like, these drunk idiots don't have the patience to do this. They would come barreling up. Because they're outside playing Pong this whole time. I can hear them through the window. They're just fucking around and drinking and playing drinking games. So it's clomp, and I mean really slow, like 20 seconds a step. By the time they reach the inner door, I'm like, man, these guys are being real patient. So the door finally cracks open. And then like fog or a mist comes in. Now I'm thinking, Jesus, these guys aren't messing around. I'm sorry, I got my dog in my face. These guys brought a smoke machine with them. So it starts coming through the door, and I'm like, Jesus, these guys have gone next level. Yeah. So slowly the smoke and the mist comes through the door. But after like 30 seconds or so, I realize it's not them. It kind of makes its way across the room in like it's like a methodical fashion, like the smoke, the mist I don't know how to describe it better than that, but it knew where it was going. It was maybe 2 feet across the floor, and the whole thing was maybe 4 or 5 feet long.
Wow.
A snake wouldn't describe it right, but that's kind of how it moved, like a slow smoke fashion, kind of moved across the room in that fashion. So it made its way across the room to the window over a period of a minute or so. So I'm like 6 feet away. It finally reaches the window. And once it reaches the window, it slowly takes on a human form. Distinctly human form. Not a lot of features visible, but without a doubt a human form. Now I'm definitely like, oh, Jesus. So I'm staring at it and I'm thinking, well, maybe I can make a break for it because this thing doesn't know I'm here. About that second, the head turns distinctly at me as I was thinking, for it doesn't know I'm here. It looks directly at me and I'm like, oh, my God. So I would say maybe it felt to me like an hour, but maybe 30 seconds pass. And then it kind of devolves back into the smoky form, and it goes back out of the room slowly. But this time, the door doesn't close behind it, and there's no footsteps going back down the stairs this time. So I'm guessing, like I said, it was about 3:30 in the morning, and I still got like an hour and a half to go. Now, I'm going to say that I finished the night out in the attic, but it wasn't because I was brave. It's because I don't know where the hell this thing went. Didn't hear any doors close, and I don't want to meet it again in the hallway. I waited until the sun came up. Nothing else happened that night, and I made my way out of the house with no further incident. But it was creepy as hell. So then when I meet the guys the next day, I'm like, tell me you saw that. But unfortunately, it went to the window during one of those time periods where I wasn't due to flash my light out the window. So they weren't looking. So nobody saw it.
Great.
No one believed him.
No, they don't. To this day, they don't.
Wow. Well, that's crazy. Yeah, that is spooky.
That's a crazy
Scott,
story.
how about you?
I've got a million. I'll try to tell one that I haven't told anytime recently.
Okay.
So when I was a kid, I grew up in a haunted house here in southern Maine. It's been said to be haunted by the people who lived in it before us, and the people who live in it after us tell people that it's haunted. So it's definitely haunted. But so there was always something going on in the house, and I was probably 10, 11 years old. And in my bedroom, back in the day, we had all the posters up everywhere, some Farrah Fawcett poster, date myself.
Ooh.
Anyways, all around my room,
Charlie's
I had
Angels.
taken, yes, I had that one. And I had these little glow-in-the-dark stickers. And I put them on the posters, on the ceiling, on the walls, everywhere. And the whole room, when you shut off the light, it lit up like the stars outside. Oh, and nice. So one night, I was laying in my bed with the lights off, going to sleep. Out of like the corner of my eye, I see something. All those stars are lit up, but I see something like black, and it just like comes in and takes the form of like. All of a sudden, it was like real quick, like something was staring over, looking down over the bed, but it was like black. Like, it's that black that you can't describe. It's like almost an absence of everything. It's just so dark black, and there was nothing, and then you just see like. Ryan described it as like a fog, but it was blackness and just into the shape of somebody. And as it formed it towards the end of my bed. And then I watched it start to move across the room. And as it was moving, those glow in the dark stars would go out as it moved in front of them. Oh, so you like to say, it's like a shadow, but it had mass to it because as it went by, the stars went out. And as it passed by, they lit back up. And I was absolutely terrified. I mean, I had stuff happen to me in the house as a kid. It spooked me. It scared me. This was really scary. It's just one of those incidents. And as it's walking down the side of my bed. And I remember just being absolutely paralyzed. Not that I could have probably moved, but I wasn't moving. I was frozen. And then it dissipated, went away after what seemed like it was probably like 5 seconds, but it seemed like forever. But you could just track it as it went across the room because of those stars.
I don't know about for you, but for me, when they dissipated, that was scarier. If you can just say that, because now you don't know where they are.
I'm just glad it was gone.
At least when you got eyes on them, you kind of say, it's there. I mean, if they can be anywhere. Like I've got eyes on them, and then they dissipate, and they didn't just disappear. They're somewhere, but now they're somewhere where you can't see them. For me, so for me, that was definitely scarier.
See, I never know, because the house was definitely haunted, but you never know if it's the same spirit each time, because it was a woman that typically haunted our house, but that didn't feel like a woman. That felt way darker. And if something's haunted, you don't know if it's just open to other things or what. But that was very, very creepy.
Wow.
Typically, it was a woman that haunted the house, and she really wasn't like that scary. But that was.
Yeah. I'm just amazed. You're one of the many guests, Scott, have been on the podcast who said, "Yeah, I live in a haunted house." It's like, oh yeah, like I had people tell me from their doors opening to seeing shadow knocks on the wall to scratches on the wall, And I always ask them this. I always ask people who lived in a haunted house the same question: why didn't you leave? Your parents just like, whatever.
It's the typical story you hear. My father forever didn't believe anybody. It's like you tell them and they're like, yeah, okay. Or if he did see something, he was telling us he didn't at first. I didn't see, whatever. Your kids are crazy. But then it started becoming so obvious to even him. Actually, it started focusing more on him, I think, because he was the man of the house. And like we said, we know that a woman had passed away in the home, and she passed away from cancer back in the early 70s. We didn't know that before moving in, but we found that out quite a bit after moving out, actually. Yeah. But it started to focus on him, and then he said stuff. But we'd lived there for so long. By the time that it was there, it just became part of your life. It was never. It was spooky. It was scary. But sometimes you go 6 months and nothing would happen. Sure. It's not like when you live in a haunted house, if something happens every day. You can go months and nothing happens, and then over like a week span, 10, 12 different things will happen. I think I said it on another show, but it's like the energy level. The more people that were in the house, the more stuff would happen. Yeah. The more energy that was there, especially the more kids that were there, they were living off of that energy. I believe that's true. Because when there was more kids, it was more active. But you could go 6 months, nothing at all.
Yeah. The other thing people told me, and tell me, Scott, if this is true, when there was major thunderstorms in the area, they would notice increase in activity. Like I would I'd have people tell me, John, when there was a bad electrical storm, I would see the shadows for sure.
Well, when we had an electrical storm, I remember my parents bought me a brand new TV and it was plugged in. I had it for 2 days and we had an electrical storm and it hit our house. It hit the house itself got struck. So, and on a different storm, the tree in front of the house was struck. And the tree came down on the power lines after. But I had that TV and the house got struck and it hit the flashing and every TV in the house was on, but it blew up my brand new TV. No one got me a new one. It lasted 2 goddamn days. Anyway, I'm not bitter, but so we were like a magnet for electricity. I don't know if the storm made it worse or whatever, but right out our house, the house got hit and the tree out front got hit. So maybe.
Awesome. That's great. Thanks guys for sharing that. By the way, like I said, my spooky friends out there, I will put Ryan and Scott's information out there and links in the episode when it comes out. And you definitely want to check these guys out because they have some, like I said, great stories. And as they said, they want to keep it fresh. So I think that's always a good thing rather than hearing the same story 3 months later. We already know that story, right? Mm-hmm. So I got a little teaser here for you before we get into the main story. So the Holmes Death Castle, I love that name, or Murder Castle, even better, was built by a serial killer, H.H. Holmes, back in 1893. And this is why he built it. I love this too. The hotel was built to lure 1893 Chicago World's Fair visitors where guests would be tortured and murdered. And guys, please tell me you didn't read the script, but if you did, that's okay. Take a guess. The location of the murder castle, what is it right now? What do you think the location is? An apartment building? A house? What do you think?
I've seen this on the news.
Government building of some sort, right?
Yeah, it's a post office.
Yes, the location is a USPS post office, which is kind of true. So if you go on Google and you look up the Murder Castle address, there's a post office, there's some apartment buildings, and there's it's really funny. There's like this tree, and supposedly, if you're being exact, the Murder Castle is where this tree is. However, I'm going to this post office, guys. The location, the people in the post office say it's always a negative vibe. Well, it's the post office. Come on, let's be honest, it's a government building. But here's what they have heard, and they have heard screams. So people in the post office have said every year in Chicago, you see they go down for Halloween, they interview the post office people, and some quit because they have seen apparitions. They have hearing screams, and some just like, I'm out of there. And dogs who pass, so you walk in your dog, you pass this building or in this area, either dogs will start yelping or they'll just drag you along. Like hey, let's go, master. let's come on,
get out of here.
We're out of here. And it's really weird too. When I looked it up too, there's some ghost haunts that go in the area, and obviously you can't go into the post office and check it out. But when you go past, people have said they feel like strange, like there's somebody watching them, or they feel dread. It's a really, really weird place, and it's just a little section of Chicago, kind of the suburbs of Chicago. It's just a little area, little sidewalk, maybe not even a block long.
The entire building is gone, right? The Murder Castle? Because to my
totally
understanding, it stretched like a block to a block, so it was a huge building, but like no vestige of it survives in any form. No, it's all gone.
Absolutely not. Nope. They made sure of that. So let me give you a little history, guys, of this. So in 1893, the World's Fair was in Chicago, and you got to remember the World's Fair in that time. I mean, they were showing things like, my God, this is a comb, and this is like an engine or something. Like, like this is, what I'm saying is, I'm being silly, but you get the idea. Yeah. It's like,
sure, you didn't have to kill the animal yourself.
Made
right?
from plants.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's like, here's a glass, like, okay. But anyway, they were celebrating, and they don't do this anymore, the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's arrival in the Americas. We don't do that anymore, because if you look at Christopher Columbus, whoops, we should celebrate this guy anymore. So this enormous exhibition featured, like I said, many wondrous exhibits, including, this is what I love, like I said, including the first gas-powered motor car. Yes. So they had that in there. The Daimler quadricycle. I don't know what that is, but okay.
Sounds badass.
Yeah, I really don't want to drive that.
This is my favorite, and I showed it to my wife, and my wife and I said, oh, absolutely, we're there. A 1,500-pound statue of the Venus de Milo made of chocolate.
Oh, yeah.
But here's the thing. It was in the summer, so I asked the same question my wife was thinking. Wait a minute. How did they keep it from melting? And I don't know, guys. I have no idea.
Fast. They did.
No.
Kids Day, quick.
Yeah.
Quick.
There's like 31 million people that went to that. They ate that shit with a quickness.
Yeah, right. So, however, the World's Fair became better known for the structure that was more gruesome than organizers could have imagined. The so-called Murder Castle of H.H. Holmes, America's first documented serial killer. And I want to make clear, documented, okay? There have been serial killers before, so, my audience out there, I know I get a lot of emails. He wasn't the first serial killer. It was blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, he's the first documented one. So let's talk about H.H. Holmes. And I'm only going to do a really brief overview because I'm reading a book right now about it, and I'm going to have to come back to it because I was reading this book, and I'm like, oh my God, I'd keep these poor guys here for 4 hours. They'd be like, stop, John, stop.
Is it Devil in the White City you're reading right now?
Yes, Devil in the White City.
That's a fascinating book. It really is.
Absolutely fascinating. Just started.
Yeah, I loved it. Loved it.
Let's just give you a basic interview of H.H. Holmes. So H.H. Holmes was born Herman Webster Mudgett. Okay, I can see why he changed his name. In New Hampshire, 1861. As an adult, he abandoned his young wife and child. He starts out to be a great guy, right, guys? In 1885 to move to Illinois. Once there, he changed his name to Holmes, reportedly as a homage to the fictional English detective Sherlock Holmes. There you go, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. You got a guy that said, I love your books. I'm going to name myself, and I'm an evil SOB. Great.
Right.
So soon after he arrived in the Chicago area, Holmes took up work at a pharmacy located near Jackson Park. One of the biggest things is 8 years later, Jackson Park would become the site of the 1893 World's Fair. So people asked, like, did he know this? And like, well, there's no way he could have known it, right? And as a pharmacist, by the way, he was horrible. I'm just starting to read the book. He ripped people off. He would be a snake oil salesman, to be a cliche term, like, oh yeah, you got a bad headache. Oh, here you go, and he just give you whatever.
He was a
cocaine
usually.
Usually.
Everything that he did.
Yeah.
Not only was he a serial killer, he was a complete.
Oh yeah, he was a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
They don't get much shit
without
here.
a doubt.
Yeah. And then one of the things, when they started building this up, they had the Columbian exhibition called Designed by some of the Americans' leading architects, including Frederick Law Olmsted, and include exhibits from more than 40 countries. So this was a big deal, guys. And the other thing is attracted more than 27 million visitors. Remember, this is the 1800s. So, today you go, oh, that's pretty good. That's a good number. But that's basically the entire population of most of the United States, at least in the Midwest.
Yeah, for sure. And back then they were traveling in by train and like horse.
Correct.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, that's really impressive. Really, really impressive.
Yeah, the numbers are unreal.
And it's considered, again, like you guys said, the limited transportation options of the time. Of course, Holmes took advantage of some of the many visitors to the city, including young women who came to the Chicago, fair for jobs at the fairgrounds. So basically, that's just a quick setup. He was like a predator, right? And he was like a lion waiting for his prey, just, lurking there, waiting. So let's talk a little bit about the murder castle itself. Historians believe Holmes was a masterful and charismatic con artist. And if you look at Holmes, he's kind of a good-looking guy, right, guys? He's for that time, he kind of fits, mustache.
I get it. He's got the stash. He's got the tall head. He looks sharp. He looks sharp.
Real
dreamboat
guy. Yeah. And
I'm guessing the Pickens was slim back. He was slim. He was pimpish.
Like we were talking about, he was a charismatic con artist. He had swindled money from the drugstore employees.
Yeah.
One of the things, he purchased an empty lot in the Inglewood neighborhood of Chicago and built a labyrinthian structure with shops on the first floor and a small apartments above. And again, there are blueprints out there, guys, if you want to look at them. I didn't get a chance to look at them yet because you have to go in and kind of request some things. But there's things on the internet that gives you an idea. And this place is huge, okay? And the edifice became known as Holmes Murder Castle, or what they said in here, booby trap, which is can you guys see Holmes just walking around kind of like a cartoon? Okay, I'm going to put this giant mouse trap here, and then I'm going to, I mean,
I think of Indiana Jones. What's that kid?
Yeah, right. Trap. He's going to be like, the walls come in and, with the spikes. And then, now, a lot of these reports are sensational because, again, it's documented, but not in the sense of, like today, where we actually can have some real information. That's usually true, not all the time, as we all know, I should say. So the space featured very soundproof rooms. I don't know how he did that. Secret passages and a disorienting maze of hallways and staircases. And these rooms were allegedly outfitted with trapdoors or chutes that dropped Holmes' unsuspecting victims to the building's basement. So, Ryan, help me out here a little bit because I think you've already read the book. One of the things they said that there was a bed and you'd be in bed, and then the mattress would go on an angle. There'd be like a laundry chute kind of thing, and you kind of shoot there. Do you remember anything like that?
I don't remember that. I remember a lot of the descriptions of his murder maze, so to speak. I don't remember anything about the bed, but then they said there was one room where they had like a pipe that let gas in, and he would look at them through like a two-way mirror.
Yeah.
And he could watch them getting piped in with the gas. One room is kind of like built like an oven where he could heat it up at his will. Who knows how accurate any of that was. I don't remember anything about the mattress, but I remember reading, whether it's true or not, it was sort of like the Winchester Castle in California, where there's records that she fired a crew. They would work for 2 weeks and she'd fire them, and then another crew would come on. So nobody knows too much about it, I guess, is the way they describe that.
Well,
Holmes' castle was definitely described that way. He didn't want anybody knowing the layout of his castle.
No,
so they would work for 2 weeks, fire them.
He never paid the contractors either, so they would quit also and not come back.
Yes.
So he swindled everybody. If there was anything to do with money, they weren't getting it from him. If they did get it, it was somebody else's money.
If even a fraction of it is true, he was so he's definitely so shady. But if a fraction of those stories are true, he's next level. But again, like you said, it's going back so far and it's passed through so many generations, and they always get exaggerated. So who knows?
Yeah,
but definitely a creepy dude, but is he historically creepy? I don't know.
The lawsuits against him do exist. There are stats.
For sure. He was definitely a murderer. He was definitely a creepy dude. But I don't know
there was a
if
lot
it goes
of
to the murder castle lengths that, historical.
I know there was lots and lots of lawsuits over like money and, him owing people and not paying, and lawsuits filed against him. Tons.
He was
many different names he was under too. He had so many.
Absolutely. So the Begin guys claims that there was part of a macabre facility of acid vats, pits of quicklime, often used for decaying corpses, just in case you guys are thinking on doing that, and a crematorium, which the killer used to finish off his victims. So he had all these descriptions, however, they say too, were described what were likely over embellished or even fabricated by reports in the 1890s. And the book I'm reading, there's another book out there that I'll put out there called Did Serial Killer H.H. Holmes Build a Murder Castle? I'm going to get this book too. And this book, though, just talks about, like, could it be possible? If you didn't have the skills, how could you build this? But like you said, and this is true, he'd bring contractors in and tell them, build this. And they'd be like, okay. Yeah. And they'd build something, and then he'd be like, could you do this? Yeah, I could do that. And then, okay, you're done. Get out. And they'd be like, where's my money? He'd be like, F off. And that'd be it, right?
He definitely built a murder castle, in my opinion. Well, there's no doubt, and I think that was his intent, but how extreme it goes and does it match the historical stories, I don't know about, to the levels it goes.
Right.
If I remember correctly,
I do think that was his intent, to take advantage of the 1893 World's Fair. That seems pretty solid that was his intent.
If I remember correctly, after he left, he was trying to build a second one, I believe. I don't know if you've seen that in the story or not.
No, I haven't seen that.
Or heard that. But after he had the first one and he was forced to leave, I'm pretty sure, was trying in the works to build a second castle. I can't remember where.
Interesting.
I'm going to have to look that up, make sure I'm not just pulling that out of my ass.
Yeah.
Share it with your ass. I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah.
It's definitely true, guys.
We'll Scott's ass.
If you don't see it,
Scott's ass.
If you don't
next week while we check Scott's
longer. If you look for hours and hours and you can't find that information, keep looking. It's there.
You can keep that information, by the way. So here's one of the things. While reports suggest Holmes killed as many as 200 people in his sinister lair, his actual number of victims may have been much lower, which, come on, guys, 200 people, that's a lot without nobody noticing. The number of victims is still debated by historians. I think, don't you think 200? That's a lot.
Yeah, that's
way high.
Way high.
So, and like I said, I'm going to have to go back to this because I'm reading some books on it. But just kind of skipping to the end here, Holmes was apprehended soon after he fled Chicago in October of 1893, following the conclusion of the World's Fair. He was arrested in Boston and eventually ended up murdering his assistant, Benjamin Peitzel, and two of the Peitzel's children. That's a whole different thing, that he was living with this one woman, and, I don't know why. if the guy came in, he just looks like what do you call it? Like out of those old movies, where the guy with the mustache, he's like that cartoon villain.
Super
like
Mario.
He looks like every cartoon villain.
Yeah, right. Yeah, if he walks into your house, you're not going, wait a minute, right?
Right.
And interestingly, while on the run, Holmes misled Pizio's wife as he collecting the insurance money. Again, he was I think he was a hell of a con artist. It's unbelievable. But from his former assistant living with the widow of the 3 children. In other words, he killed the husband and then was like, hey, I'm here, baby. Let's get married. And then, of course, he killed her eventually and the children. And police eventually discovered the body of one of the murdered children, and discovery led to Holmes' arrest. And then following his arrest, Holmes claimed, and this is where it's like, yeah, okay, buddy. It's a little too much boasting, more than 200 people in the murder castle. He ultimately, like I said, confessed to murdering Peitzel and 2 of his daughters. Experts now believe he may have killed as few as 9. It's still a significant number,
it's
right?
Still a big number, yeah,
for sure, for sure.
And he definitely killed those kids.
Definitely.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and there's no doubt about that. And hey, wait, something fell out of my ass here. It says it's mentioned in a couple of books about H.H. Holmes that after leaving show in late 1893, he attempted to build another castle in Fort Worth.
Ooh!
But found that the authorities there were a bit nosier than the ones in Chicago had been, and never finished it. So
at one point, he got arrested for stealing a horse, and that was in between his murder castle and his bringing back, because getting arrested for horse thieving was a hangable offense. I think it was Texas.
Right.
I don't remember.
Especially in Texas.
But this was after the murder castle and before he was brought back. He was arrested for horse thievery, and they, basically, we're going to hang you here or we'll send you back there. And he chose to be extradited, which back then probably took a month.
Right. Yeah. Takes forever.
On horseback to get him.
Yeah. Right, yeah. And then
he was probably hoping over the month I get a chance to escape. That's why he chose to be extradited.
Or to talk somebody into letting
him walk away.
Just walk away. Yeah. And I love Holmes. I like to use the word of bravado, his kind of just outward confidence and stuff. When he was in captivity, waiting his trial and sentencing, he authored his own autobiography, which is Holmes' own story, in which he wrote, I could not help the fact that I was a murderer, no more than the poet can help the inspiration to sing. Isn't that great? It's just the balls on this guy.
Sure. He stole that from Bob Dylan.
Yeah, come on. What do you think you're doing?
No, you're right though. He was so insanely arrogant it wasn't even funny.
Yeah, and it's just unbelievable. He's just saying, hey, look at me. I couldn't help it. What, it's like, come on, man.
He always a lot of the smarter than everybody that was around him.
Yeah.
And the most famous literary work on Holmes is the best-selling nonfiction novel, The Devil in the White City, by Elk Larson, which was published in 2003. I don't have the book in front of me right now. And then I thought if I show it, I'd probably have the author reach out and be like, hey, you owe me money. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to show it. And then after a brief incarceration, Holmes was hanged in the greatest place in the world to be hanged, in Philadelphia in 1896. His body is buried. Why would you? Okay, this doesn't make sense. Guys, help me out with this. His body is buried in Holy Cross Cemetery outside Pennsylvania City. Why would you put him right? Wouldn't you just put him in, throw him in a river or something, or just be like, screw this guy?
Money speaks. His family had connections. I don't know. I don't know why they would have done that. Even back then, they knew that those were well within the days that people would have just dug up the body and desecrated it. So
yeah.
I don't know why they would have done that.
Right. I don't. So just really quickly about the Ed Gein. We were talking offline about Ed Gein, a little bit about that. So I live about 2 hours away from Plainfield, Wisconsin, where this all happened with Ed Gein in his residence. The people used to have, the cemetery used to have Ed Gein's headstone. And what people were doing was they were chipping off the headstone and then selling it on eBay, right? So the police department moved his headstone into the city hall. So now Ed Gein's tombstone or headstone, whatever you want to call it, is in the basement of the Plainfield City Hall, which is super hilarious. That why I'm saying this is because wouldn't people, come on, not go to Philadelphia and find his grave headstone or whatever and just chip off, like they're doing there and try to sell it? I just
you would think so.
Right?
Do they even know where is it? People know where it's at?
I don't know.
There? It could be an unmarked grave. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be unmarked.
But you would think exactly that would happen.
And one of the things too, I thought what he said was here they were asking, what happened to the murder castle, and even though he got arrested and executed and stuff, they still said for more times than not before Holmes would try to bribe authorities to avoid punishment. So he would before he was hanged, he'd be like, "Hey, hang that guy! I'll give you $50. Hang that guy! I'll give you $20. Yeah, hang that guy." I'm like, the balls on this guy. He's writing his own autobiography. He's bribing people to avoid punishment. Hang that guy.
I think it was arrogance. I think he always thought he was the smartest guy in the room. Yeah. I always wished he was the smartest guy in the room. I remember reading well before he even got to Chicago, he was at the University of Michigan. So this is on his way up. He wasn't even a pharmacist yet, or whatever the hell he became or claimed to become. He was stealing bodies from cemeteries, and then he was selling them for medical skeletons. They were in high demand
I didn't
back
get
then.
To that.
So him and his friends were stealing, digging up graves. He's always been a scumbag. Always been, was. Yeah. But he always wanted to be the smartest guy in the room, and then when he got caught, he would one up you and be like, "No, I'm not doing this. I'm this guy."
And you guys have probably heard this rumor too, that there are theories that Holmes was never hanged, that they hanged another man in his place. There's another person in his grave. That's been a conspiracy theory, or whatever you guys want to call it. But in response to that, I thought this was really funny. In Holmes' descendants, which I love that. How would you like to be the descendant of Holmes? Hey, how was that serious?
Want to be?
Yeah, it's good on the job application.
Yeah, is that H.H. Smith? One of the things in Delaware, his descendants supposedly live. They petitioned to have his remains exhumed so they could undergo DNA testing. The results, drum roll, they did belong to Holmes. So sorry, guys. There goes your conspiracy theory out the window. And also, the murder castle, what'd they do? Just tear it down, right? Whatever. No, 1895, the murder castle was gutted by a fire. Reportedly, they saw two men entering the building late one night, which is, again, frontier justice or whatever you want to call, and burned it to the ground. And the funny thing is, the building itself remained standing until 1938, and then they did tear it down. So yes and no, it got gutted, like I said, by fire, but it was still there, which is super weird to me. For let me see, they went in, I think in the late 1800s or something, early 1900s, but it's sat there for, I don't know, let's say 30 years?
Yeah, it's a long time.
It's just sitting there?
Yeah, like a memorial to him. You had to drive by that old gutted place. And they were building town around it. It's like right downtown.
Yeah. Right.
It's weird to me that the descriptions of the house are so vague still to this day, because so many people must have seen it from the inside or in the outside. There's only a handful of photographs from the outside. There's a couple of diagrams from the inside, but it's a big mystery, but it shouldn't be. No. Like you just said, it basically stood, at least in a rough version, for 40-something years.
But this story wasn't
a lot of people saw it
till later on, though.
No, but I mean, if this big murder basement existed, a bunch of people saw it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm going to revisit this because I skipped over a lot of stuff just for the sole fact of I'm not done with the book and I want to do its due diligence again and go through and everything. But like I said, the site is now occupied by the Inglewood branch of the U.S. Post Office, which I think is absolutely really hilarious. That's
poetic.
Post Office. It's just poetic, right? And, one of the things too when he was hung, he said something to the effect of like, I can't help that the devil's in me, basically, because because that's another thing where I'm like, how could they use another guy unless Holmes coached him like, hey, guy, that you're going to die for me? This is what you need to say. Say something about the devil and it's in me and this guy. Why would you, right? That wouldn't make any sense.
He was way too arrogant to have ever coached another guy to be him. He would have had to have done it himself.
Yeah, it's just so bizarre. And one of the things, like I said, is that they exhumed the body. You know, he's done so many things, had such an effect on society at that time, because that was the first time where it's actually, because serial killer did not get the name of serial killer to, I believe, the 1950s or 40s. It wasn't like people didn't know it like that, right? It was just, he was a murderer. And that's what it was. But I like I said, I'm going to revisit this. Do you guys have any other tidbits you'd like to share about the great H.H. Holmes?
No, I think I've shared them all. Other than he was a New Englander, don't mention that.
Yeah. Leave that part in. I'm real proud of that part.
He's from Michigan. He's not from New Hampshire. He was from Michigan.
He was a scumbag, man. The guy was a swindler. He ripped off so many people. I don't think that with his castle, they don't know how many people actually died in the castle and how many people he actually ever killed. But it seemed like to run his scams, he just killed people just so he could keep going. You know, and it was just about getting their money and getting it. I don't until you hear about what was in the murder castle. When I've heard his stories, I always thought of it as he killed out of necessity to keep the schemes going. I didn't think that he was a serial killer like some of these other serial killers that got off on killing people and doing all the weird stuff, because he would poison people. He would use gas and stuff like that. He wasn't the type of serial killer that was like getting off on the actual murders. I don't think.
He did what he had to do to cover his tracks
he had no problems.
Personal gain.
And to cover his own ass. Yeah, he had no problem taking somebody else to try to keep his.
But once he got pinched, he wanted credit for every murder that ever happened.
Right.
Which kind of defines his personality. He didn't do them. Right. But once he caught him and he was going to get hanged anyway, he wanted credit for all of them.
He was going to be the big dog.
Yeah. Because I think in the back of his mind, how psychotic he was thinking he was going to get away with this, and then be like, go on, like, you know, where in 1800s, where, like, you know, like a Buffalo Bill show where they have this famous Western cowboy or sheriff, whoever, and they would go out there like Wyatt Earp, and he'd tell his stories, and you'd be like, oh my God, and they'd do a little horse show or whatever the hell they do. That's what I think H.H. Holmes was going to do, you know.
I always thought he was the smartest guy in the room, for sure. Yeah,
absolutely.
They bring him out on a tour, and he just share his story. No, I agree with that 100%. I think that's exactly who he was and what he was.
Yeah, that's
better
awesome.
than everybody.
Yeah, that's crazy, right? So, guys, thank you so much for, listening to this and bringing in some information and stuff. Like I said, I'm going to revisit it because there's so much to this guy. It's unbelievable the things he got away with. And I didn't even get into his family life, about his parents and everything. I didn't even get into that, which they must have been a hoot and a half. To use an old term, it must have been lots of fun.
Barrel of laughs, that crew.
Yeah, just a barrel of laughs. So, guys, tell my spooky friends, what do you guys got coming up here? What fun episodes you planning or looking at?
We've got something pretty big for us coming up. We've done another episode that we called our paranormal field trip. And we went out and we did an investigation in Riceville, which is an old ghost town in the state of Maine. Well, it's time for our second one. And tell them where we're going, Ryan.
So we're going to go to the house from The Conjuring, the real Conjuring house from the movie. Not the one from the movie, the real one.
The real Conjuring house.
Yeah.
So we are going on June 18th. And we're taking along Kevin, who was on your last show with Where the Weird Ones are. Not your last one, but a few episodes back. He's coming with us, and Joe from Tales, Trails, and Tavern is also. So all three of us will be there. We're going to go live. Yeah, Ryan's going to go live from the basement.
So we're going to live stream that night. I called the basement. Yeah. Anybody who's seen that movie, The Basement is creepy as shit.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm an idiot. I covered that in my story earlier. I'm claiming The Basement.
So
guys, just slam the door
I'm live
on
streaming from the basement.
Right.
Then,
slam the door on them.
Yeah, exactly. Hire a smoke machine. Blow the door. You'll get me.
So we have that
this
coming
time.
up, and we're gonna go live, but we're gonna record a podcast, and we'll put that out also.
Love it.
That's coming. That's the big thing we got coming up right now. We're gonna plan on going a couple times each year. We're gonna go.
Yeah, we're gonna do 2 a year, so we're gonna work on one in the fall, but that's the one for the spring, and we're excited about that. It's gonna be hard to top that one. That's a big one.
Yeah, we have to thank Kevin for that. He set that all up. So
Joe and Kevin are great guys. So we're all going down. It's going to be like a triple header for 3 podcasts. We're pumped about that, and
it should be a good time.
So follow us on Instagram because that's where we're going to go live that night.
Yeah,
nice. Love it, guys. I'll definitely check that out, and I'll definitely share it with my spooky friends. Again, thank you so much for taking time out. I could talk to you guys for hours. This was a blast. Check your closets. Make sure there's nothing in there tonight because you never know.
Of dicks.
I'm just saying.
You brought that up with the trash this week.
When you go to the Conjuring house, you might want to check that too. I'm just saying, guys. Yeah, So, guys, thank you so much. We end every show like this. We say hi to our ghost. Hello, ghost, because you never know. You might have a ghost. You want to be nice. And then we say, stay spooky.
Stay spooky, everyone.
Guys.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Scott Ryan. You guys are the greatest. Thank you later.
Thanks for having us.